you have another question. Yeah. And then I'll give every member of the panel 3 minutes. Well, I'm told I'll start with you. I've got another word yet.
Thank you. How can refugees present themselves to improve their public image as portrayed in the media?
George, over to you. Did you everyone hear the question? How can refugees portray themselves better? Was it better in the? Yeah.
I wrote this out very quickly.
Yes.
What I've got is jointly, because I've done it on behalf of a couple of other people. How can refugees present themselves better to improve the image that's portrayed by the media?
Okay, to improve the image as portrayed by the media. Yeah.
Well, that presupposes that refugees have somehow behaved badly or that they deserve any reputation in the media that they have, and I don't agree with that. I speak as a grandson of Irish immigrants who fled here from the consequences of British occupation in Ireland. People in Congo have fled the Congo as a consequence of the imperialist intrigues and crimes against the people of the Congo. The murder of Patrice Lumumba, the imposition of the dictatorship of Mobutu, and the fostering of ethnic hatreds and civil war in the country. Most of the refugees that were here 15 years ago and 10 years ago were fleeing from the consequences of the Western war on Yugoslavia. And I could go on, believe me. Many of the people here who are from refugee stock or immigrant stock are here because we were there. They're here because we went to their countries and stole all their things. When Britain arrived in Bengal, it was the richest country in the world. And when Britain left Bengal, it was the poorest country in the world. You don't have to be a genius to work out what happened in between. So all these immigration stories, refugee stories, are all, in my worldview, consequent on the political system of capitalism and its overarching big brother imperialism. And we're not really in much of a position to preach about why people get on their bikes and come looking for work here, partly because we've destroyed the possibility of them working there. Bengal is a very good case in point. We systematically wrecked the industry of Bengal and other places in order to protect our own industries here in Yorkshire, as it happens, and also in Lancashire. So these are all, none of these stories exist in isolation. And if my 3 minutes is coming to a close, let me apologise to you, Chair, and to the audience for our late arrival, please. I had an appointment in Parliament this morning and then in Nottingham this afternoon on the way here, and the M1 is predictable on a Friday.
Thank you very much. I'll go round this way. Mark.
I'm in a fairly privileged position because there is nothing better in the world than having the opportunity, when it's just landed on your desk, that you've received a letter from the Home Office that your client has just been granted refugee status. And to be able to call your client and to be able to say, after all the time that they've suffered, not only in the country that they've been in, but the suffering of having to put up with the Home Office and the way that they're treated abysmally here throughout the asylum process, to be able to say to them that actually they're safe is one of the loveliest moments you will ever have in your life. I have to say that I'm inspired every single day by the people who come into my office. The stories that they have, the sheer humanity that they have, and to be honest, the absolute loyalty to this country and affection for the people that are here. Even the fact that they're living sofa surfing from one friend to another, even the fact that they have no money, the fact that they're here makes them feel so happy. I've never met a refugee that hasn't been an inspiration. They've got nothing to feel that they have a bad reputation. They don't. And those people who think that they have a bad reputation, I'm afraid, are clearly ignorant. And it's simply a matter, I wish everybody could meet the sort of people that I have the privilege of meeting every single day.
Well, the question was, are refugees presenting themselves in the right way? The only way refugees need to present themselves to me is as genuine refugees. I don't have a problem with refugees, asylum seekers. You know, I and my party would abide by all the international conventions on refugees and asylum seekers. We understand the difference between benefit migration and asylum seekers and refugees. So I don't think genuine refugees and asylum seekers need to present themselves in any way. If they're genuine and they're genuinely looking for asylum, then we should do our bit as part of the international community and accept those people. Where we do have a problem is where people are coming into this country for the issue as economic migrants. And this is and the question I think was put in a way because I think people get confused with this, and I think the media deliberately confuses refugees, asylum seekers and migrants. There's a fundamental difference. We understand that difference. We 100% respect refugees and asylum seekers, but on migration, that's a whole different story, and we need to look at that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I mean, like Mark, I think I'm privileged every day to work with people whose just stories about why they've come here, how they've come here, is inspiring, but also increasingly for me it's about inspiring about what people do here. And in answer to your question, David, I think I'd like to use two examples where I think there's real kind of benefits that you can see that are actually being brought to this country by not just asylum seekers and refugees, but I would argue migrants as well. The first is about educational achievement. I mean, in terms of, if you look, in answer to the issue about pressures on schools, if you look at the leaps in educational achievement by children of refugees in this country, in terms including and asylum seekers and migrants, it is staggering. And I think these are citizens of the future, and I think the fact that this myth that that somehow they're only putting pressures on school, drain on the state, I think if we're investing in the future, then I think clearly kind of children of refugees, asylum seekers and migrants are the future, and we need to continue to invest. The other is about volunteering and the fact that there are hundreds of refugees and asylum seekers who are volunteering across kind of Yorkshire and Humber, not just for other refugees and asylum seekers, but actually kind of for other people who are kind of suffering in terms of the consequences of some of the social policies of this country, particularly around homelessness, particularly around welfare benefits. I think there's particular issues at the moment about the government is actually trying to kind of try and impose stopping asylum seekers volunteering, which has got no legal kind of right to do, and we're currently challenging. And these are people who are, it's not just, as I said, working for refugees and asylum seekers, but actually for other people who are vulnerable in the community.
Thank you very much.
How can refugees present themselves better to improve the image? I think we have two parts here. Refugees themselves, and also those who are not refugees, or let's say the host community as well. Refugees, as refugee, I always encourage my fellow refugees to telling them that when you go to any country, the first passport is not the one you put in your pocket. It's the language of the land. And if, for example, as family, although we came from French-speaking country, in 10 years we have managed to integrate properly. I'm not ashamed to say that as a family. It's because we took that principle as a key. Wherever you go, tomorrow you may go to China, because China is emerging. The first passport is to learn the Chinese. So when you come to the UK, it's a shame to be here, you refugees. 10 years later, people translating for you in the NHS system. It's not correct. That is what I do tell to my fellow. But in the other side, I have also to tell the host community this. Thank you for receiving us. thank you, honestly, for giving us this space where we can sleep without fear of neighbors. But you have to know that when you receive somebody, you have also to show the love. Love is a key. In some families in Africa, you can see somebody receiving a neighbor's child for babysitting because mom is going somewhere, and then they don't feed properly the child, and that is showing that there is no love. So you may give a space to somebody without love. It will be shown in your behaviors. For example, let me give my own example. I'm walking in a street of Bradford, and let's say two young people stopping in front of me and saying, "You black, what are you doing in this country? Go back to Africa where you belong to." You imagine how somebody can feel. You have given me a space, but there is no love attached to that. So I have to say that, David, it's fine to show that refugees have to show, have to present themselves properly so that the image can change. But also we need the host community to show love when they receive us.
Okay, the two at the back, and then you, yeah? And I've seen the people in this row, so we'll have a number of comments before we allow the panel to come back in. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kieran. I'm a student at the University of Chester. I think the people who need to be looking at their behaviour when it comes to refugees are not the refugees themselves about how they're portrayed, but how our press portrays them. These are the people that need to be looking at their behaviour when it comes to how we brand refugees, because they're the ones who are disgraced.
Thank you. There's someone next to you. Yeah.
I would just like to ask the panel, but especially UKIP, how much they actually reckon the benefits, how much you get from benefits a week, especially as a refugee?
Okay. Do you want a direct answer first? That's a direct question. So would you like to just?
Yeah. Well, as I said, on the subject of refugees and asylum seekers, you know, we don't have a problem as a party with that. As I said before, we'll abide by the international conventions on refugees and asylum, so we don't have a problem with that. So, you know, I believe that they can't actually claim benefits as refugees when they come into the country. But as I say, we don't have a problem personally with that. You know, our problem is with economic migrants. So, you know, as I say, it's not a problem for us.
Okay.
Can
Thank you.
I just ask
Yes.
a question to you, because I'm delighted to
I'm
hear
aware there's more questions.
that UKIP is going to sign up to all the conventions. I'm assuming that means the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yeah, that's a direct provocation, so I think you have the right to
answer that. No, but it is a very good question that deserves an answer. And the answer is very simple. We'll abide by the EU Convention on Human Rights, but our mission as a party and for our country is to bring our laws back to this country. When we regain our sovereignty in this country, we'll make our own immigration laws and we'll make our own asylum and refugee laws.
To suit your purposes.
But the main principle is, as I said to this gentleman and as I mentioned earlier, our principle is, and it's not going to change, we will always fulfil our international obligations with regard to refugees and asylum seekers. That's not going to change. That's the principles of our party. We're a libertarian party. With regard to economic migration, it's a different thing. So the answer to your question is, we'll come out of the European Convention, but we'll have our own rights. I'll tell you something for this. The EU talks about human rights. If anyone looks into the EU's human rights, they'll find out the EU's human rights are not human rights at all. Let's bring our ancient rights back, our ancient freedoms, habeas corpus, rights to trial by jury. They're the things that we need to bring back in this country.
Okay.
Hitler pulled out of the League of Nations and had the enabling law in 1933.
All right, I think you were next, and yeah,
Mark,
then I'll bring you in. Yeah.
Mark stole my question. I forgive him totally, but I'm glad he asked it. So.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
Yes, you, and then the lady here. Yeah.
Thank you. 60 years ago, my grandparents came over from Ireland. My grandfather came, he was an army officer, then a builder, and worked. I have freedom to migrate anywhere in Europe. I have lived in India, in China, teaching English, learning the language, teaching in exchange. I have those benefits. Any refugees I've met, any internally displaced people, I always found them warm, welcoming. The people in my community, I know we feel the same. The problem comes from the media and politicians who are very far removed from this. People who do not deal face to face with these kind of people, who do not meet them, who do not get to know them. The reason most politicians want immigration is for cheap labour. It's not getting to know them, it's not living alongside families. I'm actually going in 2 weeks to the Council of Europe to do their human rights education course. The fact UKIP think it can provide something better when it's a party based around fear and hatred is frankly laughable.
Okay, lady here and the lady there. Yep.
I'm Rita Armitage, I chair Beacon, Bradford Ecumenical Asylum Concern. And I've been very interested in the responses of the panel, who are all making very positive comments about the asylum seekers and refugees that they have known. And if you like, saying it isn't up to you to some practical ways as to how you can improve your image. But there seems, unless I'm mistaking it, to be a consensus that actually it's not simply left to refugees. In Beacon, because of the work we do, standing alongside people who are going through the appeal process, etc., one of the things that is so difficult to counter is the culture of disbelief. That refugees and asylum seekers do tell their stories, and they are moving. It is a privilege to listen to them and to get to know them. But when they come through the judicial process, they cannot counter that culture of disbelief. I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask the panel what they believe we, who are committed to the work, and they, as a panel involved in the work and in politics, can do to ease that culture.
Okay, I will come back to the panel on that, but I want to take a few more from the audience. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sandra Haig. It's just a little lesson, really. You said you might need this if you're going to be a prospective candidate. Refugees aren't entitled to benefits. Refugees are entitled to exactly the same as you or I. And I think that's a fundamental point that you need to understand. Asylum seekers, whilst the claim is ongoing, may be in mass support, barely living above destitution levels, and when their claim comes to the end and is exhausted, they're left to starve.
Thank you. You had your hand up. Did you want to come in? I've heard it, seen it up the work.
My own question was based on the fact that you could want to introduce sort of a Bill of Rights. Wouldn't it be better for the British government and the British people to decide on a Bill of Rights themselves, rather than have it done by a Council of Europe based in Brussels, and actually have a self-amending and self-repealing process where the right to free speech, which is Article 10, can be taken away if the Council vote on it? Should we look towards the US Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and establish a platform for human rights based on that?
Okay, thank you. And you had your hand up, yeah. Okay, then I'll ask David the question to comment, and then I'll just ask the panel if anyone would like to come back on some of those critical questions.
I wanted to touch on a point that George Galloway raised with regard to Bengal and the wealth that was stripped out of the province by the old British Empire. Well, the British Empire ceased to be many years ago now, and we have the Commonwealth, effectively with 57 nations. So we wouldn't have 57 nations gathered together unless they thought there were some particular benefits of being part of the British Commonwealth. I'd also like to touch on the Ugandan Asians that settled here in the early 70s. I think from memory there were about 30,000 of them that came in. They really did a marvellous job. Many of them are successful retailers, restaurateurs. They've really shown the best image of what refugees can do to this country over the last 35 or 40 years. I don't think we've got a bad reputation in terms of bringing people in from abroad and giving them opportunities. We tend to think in sessions like this that we have got a bad reputation, but I really don't think we have as a country. I think people abroad look to this country for an example of what we have done to help people.
Okay, just ask David to come back, and then I'll ask you to come back in, George. Dave, yeah.
It's just, I just wanted to turn the coin around a little bit, and if, as we have just been discussing, the refugees are well able to present themselves in the best light, how is it that they, is it just politics that the media is able to present them in, the worst light, or is it something else going on as well?
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the panel. I know this will mean we probably have less questions, but a lot of things have come up from you. So I want to go through the panel. Judicial disbelief, benefits, refugees, asylum seekers, Bill of Rights. So I'll ask the panel. They can, choose lots of the points that they'd like to come in on. So Jason, I'll start. Actually, can I start with George? Because George was about to come in, aren't you, George?
Well, I was just going to say, trust me, sir, we have a bad reputation. Trust me on that. You may think it undeserved, but then you think the British Empire came to an end a very long time ago. In fact, the British Empire, in one sense, came to alive in your lifetime, came to an end in your lifetime, and in another sense, has still not ended. Indeed, some of our politicians are busily trying to rebuild it. In the lifetime of many people still alive today, the House of Commons, in which I've sat for 26 years, governed the entirety of the subcontinent of India, and with 60,000 soldiers and civil servants. And in that period of time, they successfully divided one part of the community against each other, divided so that they could better rule, and looted the Indian subcontinent. That's why I find it so difficult for people to moan now that there are some people from the Indian subcontinent here. If we were actually to make reparation to the Indian subcontinent, trust me, the cupboard would be absolutely bare. I cannot imagine what the benefits are of membership of the British Commonwealth except an annual jamboree for the potentates and rulers of the 57 countries, and that might be indeed the answer. Let me tell you about, David, about the politicians. Last week, or week after, I forget, I was on Question Time with Nigel Farage, and I had dinner with him afterwards. Nigel Farage, as the name suggests, is a French Huguenot refugee, married to a European woman. I know nothing about wine or any other alcohol, but he seemed to be a connoisseur of the finest wines at the BBC's expense. He could pronounce perfectly the French title of the wine, and indeed scoured the menu for all sorts of European delicacies. He lives a very good life, such that he has set up a tax haven, avoiding dodge in the Channel Islands, for which he apologized today in the newspapers. So he has nothing against foreigners or foreign places or semi-foreign tax havens. It's all an act. Our friend here might, because if you'll forgive me, he seems slightly less a grand European man. But it's all an act on Farage's part, because it dredges votes. If you talk about Johnny Foreigner, whether it's Johnny Foreigner across the channel, or Johnny Foreigner with a brown face who's an economic migrant, spoken as if that was some kind of hideous crime to be an economic migrant. You believe in capitalism. You believe in the free movement of capital. Why are you so against the free movement of people looking for work? That's a question that needs to be answered by you. It's all an act. Right-wing politicians and their echo chamber in the right-wing media drum up these immigration and refugee scares to divide people, the better to rule them. Just like we set people in the Indian subcontinent against each other, the better to rule them. If you could get the white working class man in Bradford believing that it's her fault or his fault that they're unemployed, that their house is substandard, that their prospects are so shrunken because of the immigrant or refugee on the corner, self-evidently, they're not going to be blaming you because they're blaming somebody else. It's all an act.
Upset that he's not a European bon vivant
Yeah.
or something else, but
There's so many questions here, but I'll have to just pick up that gentleman there, or the person up there that mentioned UKIP's policies of hatred. Well, I don't know what they are, but if this person, if you think that you're against that people who are against unlimited immigration because they want to save our public services are preaching hatred, then you'll have a very unhappy life, sir. But that's the first thing. George Galloway just
since you'll never be elected anyway, I suspect it's not going to be a problem.
well, let me tell you something, and we'll have a little gamble later, sir.
All right.
In the next election,
Let's do it now.
The next election, we're going to return double-figure MPs. There's a fact for you. But on George Galloway, there we are.
I've just been reminded we haven't got a gambling licence.
Let me just come back on George Galloway as well.
Double-figure MPs.
Because George Galloway likes to talk about capitalism. What we've got in this country, actually, and what we've got in the US, and what we've got in the EU, it's not capitalism, George. It's corporatism. We're against corporatism. Corporatism is big government. It serves big business. We're for capitalism, which is small government and helps small business.
Free movement of capital.
Free movement of capital. What we believe in, George, is we're not against immigration. We want a sensible immigration policy. And for these people in the audience to suggest that our policy is a policy of hatred. So do Australians believe in a policy of hatred? Their policy is like a point system. Well, if that's the case, then I feel sorry for you, love. You know, do New Zealand believe in hatred? Do Canada believe in hatred? I don't think so. But this is a question. I just want one last thing. If I could just one last thing. This young gentleman there brought up a really, really good point about why are we making our human rights in Europe. He's exactly right, and this is not on immigration, it's on everything. As a democratic, as a sovereign nation, we should be allowed to make our own laws with regard to immigration, with regard to asylum, with regard to everything. It's not for the foreign politicians to tell us how to behave. And and if the British people decide, in their wisdom, that they want unlimited immigration, and whatever they want, that is up to the people. But let's let the people decide. It's not to George Galloway to decide, it's not to the EU to decide. I put it in the hands of the British people.
Thank you very much. I've got one from the lady
I'm
in the
British,
audience.
by the way.
You can have a vote.
I've got the lady in the audience who's had a hand up for a while. I'm going to let her speak, and then other members of the panel did want to come back on this. So, yeah.
I'd just like to respond to the panel and the audience, actually. I think, my name's Fiona Hall. I represent the ordinary woman in the street in the UK today. And I'm not sure if everybody's listening to what I'm listening to here, but there is a distinct difference between asylum seekers and refugees who have a genuine cause to be here and seek asylum, and there are the economic migrants, however Jason wants to portray them. There is a huge difference. And I think there's a lot of people that are missing that point massively right now, and I think you need to listen to yourselves and listen to what is actually being said and understand it before you kind of jump on the bandwagon.
I've got loads of people pressurising me here. There's a lady desperate. I'm going to have to meet them, and then I will come back to the panel. And that's really so. There'll be more time for more questions in a minute.
Maggie Pierce. I came here today to give support to my many friends who are refugees and asylum seekers. I realise now that there's no problem. Jason doesn't have a problem with refugees and asylum seekers. My issue now is that I am incredibly worried about the fate of my 13-year-old grandson, who is a Czech citizen. If this sort of thing goes ahead, when will I ever get to see my grandchildren? If we put up the barriers now, you can bet your bottom dollar that other people will do it also. We'll have to have visas to get into other countries, which we by and large don't have to do from this country. It's going to become incredibly difficult. We have already had some free movement of people. The world is a big place. For heaven's sake, can we please stop putting down Eastern European migrants?